What unfolds when one of Hollywood's most intense actors meets a talk show host who believes he's beyond reproach? You're about to witness the exact moment Tom Hardy's famously controlled demeanor broke live on air. It all began with what seemed like a harmless question, but quickly escalated into a dramatic clash. Before we explore this explosive exchange that stunned the studio, don't forget to hit subscribe and leave a comment below. This is the kind of story that will change how you see late-night TV forever. The atmosphere at Jimmy Kimmel Live was tense that Thursday night in 2025. Tom Hardy had come to promote his new gritty thriller, but his posture sent a warning. He sat stiffly in his seat, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with a storm that few would dare to provoke. Those familiar with Hardy knew he could be a ticking time bomb. But Kimmel, oblivious to the tension, greeted him with his usual smile, brimming with confidence. "So Tom," he said casually but with intent, "we've got to talk about the headlines. People are curious about your personal relationships," he added, leaning in with anticipation. "Our audience wants to hear it from you." Hardy's eyes narrowed, a subtle cue that sent a ripple of anxiety backstage. "Jimmy, I'm here to talk about the film," he replied in a quiet, firm voice. "Let's keep it there, shall we?" But Kimmel didn't back off. Sensing an opportunity, his grin sharpened. "Come on, you can't hide everything when you're a public figure," he said playfully. "The tabloids are all over your marriage. Want to clear things up?" The crowd grew restless as the tension thickened. Hardy said nothing at first, but the silence was deafening. When he finally spoke, his tone was cold and deliberate. "I said I'm here to discuss my work," he repeated, each word landing with weight. "My personal life is just that, personal." Kimmel responded with a chuckle, veiled as humor but intended as a jab. "For someone who plays all these tough guys, you're awfully sensitive about a little question," he quipped. "It's not like I'm asking for national secrets, Tom." "Sensitive?" Hardy repeated, his accent deepening with irritation. "No, Jimmy. I'd call it having boundaries. Something you might want to look into." Kimmel's smile faltered briefly, but he pressed on. "Wow, sounds like someone's having a tough day," he joked, his tone tinged with mockery. "Let's talk about your method acting then. I heard you stayed in character for months. That must have been hard on the people around you, huh?" Hardy's hands, once still, clenched tightly, his knuckles turning white. "What are you trying to say?" he asked, his voice a low, dangerous growl. "Nothing, really," Kimmel replied, feigning innocence. "Just that Hollywood has stories about how intense you can be. Some people say you're difficult, demanding, maybe even unstable while in character." The room turned icy. The audience was silent, waiting. Hardy leaned in, speaking just above a whisper, but with a menace that cut deeper than shouting. "Unstable," he said slowly, each syllable a threat. "Did you just call me that, on national television?" Kimmel's producer frantically gestured from offstage, but the host was too caught up to notice. "Hey, I'm just repeating what people say," Kimmel shrugged. "Hollywood loves gossip. Maybe if you opened up a bit more, they wouldn't have to speculate." Hardy's voice rose like a gathering storm. "My process," he said slowly, deliberately, "is none of your concern. Neither is my personal life, my marriage, or anything else beyond the work I came here to promote." His eyes flared as he leaned in. "But since you're so captivated by difficult behavior, let me ask you something." Jimmy Kimmel's confidence wavered. A forced laugh broke through, cracking the smooth surface of his demeanor. Hardy's eyes were fixed on him. "How many guests have stormed off your show?" he demanded. "How many celebrities refuse to sit here because of the way you ambush people?" "I don't know what you mean," Kimmel replied, his voice shaky. "We're just having a conversation, Tom. Just talking." But Hardy's voice rose, slicing through the air and jolting the audience. "You think this is a conversation?" he snapped. "You've spent the last 10 minutes trying to provoke me for the sake of your cameras." His words came in sharp, relentless waves. "You've questioned my professionalism, my mental health, my personal life," he said. All while hiding behind that fake smile. A heavy silence blanketed the studio. The only sound was the quiet whirring of cameras recording everything. Kimmel looked shaken. His usual calm unraveling under Hardy's intensity. "Tom, I think you're overreacting," he said, his voice weak and uncertain. "Overreacting?" Hardy rose to his full height, commanding the room like a force of nature. "You want to see what overreacting looks like?" he asked, his tone tight with restrained anger. "Is this what you wanted, the unstable method actor everyone likes to gossip about?" Kimmel leaned back, instinctively distancing himself. The smile disappeared from his face. "Tom, maybe we should just take a breath," he said, his voice trembling. "No, Jimmy. We're not doing that," Hardy shot back, his words sharp as glass. "Let's talk about what you actually do on this show, night after night." He stepped forward, voice heavy with intent. "You bring guests in, pretending it's about promoting their work," he said. "Then you turn around and humiliate them for a few laughs." His gaze locked on Kimmel. "You pry into their private lives, treat rumors like facts, and call it harmless fun." Kimmel scrambled for control, his voice cracking. "Look, this is live television. Things can get out of hand," he said, reaching for anything to hold on to. "There's really no need to." "No need to what?" Hardy cut him off, his voice booming. "No need to call out a bully when I see one?" His tone didn't waver. "No need to defend myself when you're trying to drag my name through the mud?" Around them, the cameras held steady. Operators froze, capturing the moment. Kimmel, usually quick with a joke, was exposed, vulnerable. Hardy's stance shifted. He was no longer just a guest. He was a presence. "You know what your real problem is, Jimmy?" Hardy said, voice sharp. "You've been doing this so long, you've forgotten we're actual human beings." His eyes burned. "We're not just material for your ratings." His voice was raw, unfiltered. Kimmel let out a weak, nervous chuckle, his skin pale under the hot lights. "Tom, maybe it's time for a commercial break," he offered, barely audible. "No," Hardy replied, planting both hands on the desk with a thunderous thud. "We're not cutting to break." He leaned in, locking eyes with the host. "You wanted this live? Then let's give them what they came for," he growled. "Let's show everyone who the real Jimmy Kimmel is." His voice was low, but each word was loaded with power. The audience sat in stunned silence, tension rising like a current in the air. The producers lingered just off stage, frozen. "You've made a career out of making people squirm," Hardy said, his voice calm but cold. "You think sitting behind that desk gives you a free pass to say anything?" His eyes narrowed, zeroing in. Kimmel's forehead glistened with sweat. He gripped the desk like a lifeline. "Tom, this is just entertainment," he whispered. "Entertainment?" Hardy repeated, the word hanging in the air like a challenge. Hardy let out a sharp, humorless laugh that cut through the air. "Is that what you call trying to break someone on camera?" he asked, his tone scathing. "When you dig into their trauma, their family, just to get laughs, that's entertainment to you?" Kimmel glanced helplessly at his producers, but they offered no help. "I never meant to offend you," he said, voice cracking. "If I crossed a line." Hardy rose, towering over the seated host, his presence overwhelming. "Jimmy, you didn't cross a line. You obliterated it," he said coldly. "You've spent this entire interview trying to provoke me. And now that I've reacted, you want to backpedal?" Kimmel's voice quivered as he attempted to regain control. "Maybe we got off on the wrong foot," he said. "Why don't we start over, talk about your movie?" "Oh, now you want to talk about my movie?" Hardy's voice was thick with disbelief. "After 15 minutes of tearing down my character, my work, my life?" The audience stirred, some discreetly pulling out phones despite the no recording rule. This wasn't just a derailed interview, it was a reckoning. "You sit behind this desk every night, thinking you're untouchable," Hardy said, pacing like a restless predator. "You think being a host gives you permission to destroy people," he continued, his voice rising. "But let me explain something to you, Jimmy," he said, pausing to face him. Hardy's stare was intense, silencing the room. I've portrayed killers, soldiers, fighters, men who've lived through nightmares you couldn't imagine, he said. And every one of them taught me how to face down bullies. His voice was calm but powerful. Kimmel was visibly rattled, his face pale, hands trembling. Tom, please, let's just, he stammered, voice barely audible. Let's what? Hardy cut in, unrelenting. Pretend none of this happened? Laugh it off and jump to the next segment where you embarrass someone else? He slammed his hand on the desk, making Kimmel flinch as the audience gasped. Do you want to know what your show really is, Jimmy? Hardy said, his voice booming. It's a place where a second-rate comedian pretends he's powerful by tearing down actual talent. His eyes burned with intensity. Kimmel's face went from flushed to ghostly white as he struggled to steady himself. You want to talk about method acting? Hardy asked, leaning in close. Well, right now, I'm not acting. This is me, Tom Hardy, calling you out. His voice was stripped of pretense, raw and honest. Kimmel barely managed a whisper, broken and defeated. Security. I think we need security, he said, scanning the room with panic. Hardy's grin was cold, almost predatory. You're calling security because someone's finally telling the truth? He asked in a low, dangerous tone. Because I'm done playing your game? He stepped closer. Here's what's going to happen, Jimmy, he said, unclipping his mic with slow precision. I'm going to finish what I started. And you're going to listen. His tone left no room for argument. For once, you'll be held accountable, he added. The audience was still, every gaze fixed on the confrontation. Hardy's movements carried dramatic weight, commanding the stage. Then I'm walking off, he said, placing his mic pack on the desk. And you'll tell your viewers why a major actor just called you a bully. His voice was unwavering. Kimmel made a last, desperate plea. Tom, we can fix this, in editing, he said, clinging to hope. But Hardy's fury exploded. This, he bellowed, voice echoing through the studio, eyes ablaze with righteous fire. This is live television. Jimmy, millions just saw the truth, he was exposed, Hardy said, his voice sharp and final. The silence that followed was overwhelming, a moment frozen in time. Kimmel sat motionless, his face twisted in fear and shame. Hardy loomed above him like a judge passing sentence on live air. Do you know what the real tragedy is, Jimmy? He asked, his voice now cool and deliberate. You used to have talent, before you got drunk on your own power, he said, each word deliberate. Before you decided mocking people was easier than making them laugh, he continued, eyes locked on Kimmel. Kimmel tried to speak, but nothing came out. He was defenseless, utterly dismantled. I did my homework, Jimmy, Hardy went on, his voice calm but cutting. Before I came here, I watched hours of your interviews, he said, unwavering. I saw how you treat people differently, he added, his gaze filled with scorn. The big stars, the industry elites, you flatter them, he said, pacing slowly. You laugh at everything they say, make them feel like royalty, he continued, his tone biting. But the struggling actors, the ones still climbing, he asked, stopping in place. Those are the ones you go after. The ones you try to break for laughs, he said, his voice fierce and rising. Phones were out now, audience members recording as producers stood helpless. The moment was already viral before the show could end. And worse, Hardy said, standing at Kimmel's desk, you've built a culture around it. Other hosts imitate you, thinking cruelty is the secret to good television, he said, his voice heavy with accusation. You've turned bullying into a late-night tradition, he continued, his tone quiet but damning. Kimmel barely managed a whisper, his voice cracking. Tom, I didn't mean for any of this to what? To hurt people? To wreck careers? Hardy snapped, his voice like a blade. To make guests dread coming here, he pressed on, relentless. You say you didn't mean it, but you kept doing it, he said, leaning in. For ratings. For laughs. To feel powerful, he added coldly. Kimmel made a move to rise, but Hardy's presence kept him frozen. Please, can we just sit down, Jimmy? Hardy said, his voice firm and commanding. I'm not done, he added, his tone leaving no room for argument. The audience was silent, captivated, as if watching a tense scene unfold in a courtroom. Even the usual background noise had faded. You want to know what truly infuriates me? Hardy asked in a hushed, dangerous tone. It's not just that you tried to embarrass me tonight, he said, his stare locked on Kimmel. It's that you prey on those who can't defend themselves, he went on, his voice building. Young, struggling actors, desperate for a break, he said, his tone raw. They sit here and take it because they don't have a choice, he added, voice seething. Then Hardy turned the guest chair dramatically to face the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, let's be clear about what you witnessed tonight, he said, his voice full and authoritative. You saw a host attempt to ruin a guest's reputation for the sake of entertainment, he continued. And when the guest fought back, that host collapsed like a coward, he said, pointing at Kimmel. The audience was still, some stunned, others nodding in agreement. This man, Hardy said, motioning toward Kimmel without looking at him, makes millions by belittling his guests. He feeds off their discomfort and thinks he's beyond consequence, he said, voice unwavering and sharp. Kimmel, his voice barely more than a whisper, made one last desperate plea. Security, please escort Mr. Hardy, he said, his hands trembling. Security. Hardy's smile shifted, cold and predatory. You're calling security because I'm exposing you, he asked, his voice low and dangerous. Because I'm not playing your game, he continued as he stepped closer to the desk. This is your show, Jimmy, he said, each word deliberate and final. And after tonight, everyone will know exactly what kind of show you run. His tone carried the weight of a verdict. With purpose, Hardy began removing his microphone pack, each movement slow and theatrical. You know the beauty of live television, Jimmy, he asked while placing the mic on the desk. You can't take this back, he said, his voice quiet but unwavering, a storm contained in each syllable. Every word, every moment of your cowardice is being broadcast to millions. His eyes stayed locked on Kimmel, whose glance darted to his producers, helpless and stunned into stillness. And here's what happens next, Hardy said, stepping back from the desk, his stance firm and commanding. I'm walking off this stage. His voice was calm, yet resolute and immovable. You'll explain to your audience why a respected actor called you a bully, he added, his words weighted. Kimmel, desperate, tried to push back, his voice a weakened echo of its usual self. This is unprofessional, Tom. You've embarrassed yourself, he said, clinging to what remained of his dignity. Hardy let out a bitter laugh, sharp and cutting like a blade through the tension. I've embarrassed myself, he asked, his voice fierce and incredulous. I just stood up to a bully who's spent years intimidating guests. His eyes burned with conviction. If that's embarrassing, I'll wear it as a badge of honor. Turning toward the audience, Hardy stood tall, every breath, every eye drawn to him. Ladies and gentlemen, you came expecting a regular interview tonight, he began, his voice powerful and full of purpose. Instead, you witnessed something more meaningful. His voice rose, charged with energy. You saw what happens when someone stands up to a bully. A few audience members began to clap, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, a wave of defiance spreading through the room. Kimmel's face paled as his own crowd turned on him, their applause growing. To everyone watching at home, Hardy said, facing the cameras with unshaken composure, remember this, being on TV doesn't give someone the right to treat others with disrespect. His tone remained firm. Hardy began walking off stage, each step measured, but he paused and turned once more. Oh, and Jimmy, he said, his figure lit dramatically by the stage lights, his presence commanding, next time you want to pry into someone's life, their relationships, their mental health, ask yourself if you'd want your family treated that way. Kimmel, grasping for control, tried one final retort. His voice sounded empty and desperate. Tom, you're making a mistake. This will haunt your career, he said, but the words fell flat. Hardy stopped near the wings, his voice like the cut of a blade, calm and final. No, Jimmy. This will haunt you. His gaze pierced through the host. I'll be fine. "I'm an actor, my work speaks for itself," he said with quiet conviction. "But you'll be remembered as the host who was taken down by his guest, live on air." Hardy left the stage, leaving Kimmel alone at his desk, a man stripped of control. The audience murmured, their voices rising with quiet judgment. Cameras kept rolling, capturing the raw moment of professional collapse. Kimmel sat motionless, his mouth opening and closing, reaching for words he couldn't find. Nothing came. No joke could erase the devastation. Finally, barely audible, he turned to the camera. "We'll be right back after this break," he whispered, but the words rang hollow. Everyone, both in the studio and at home, knew things would never be the same. The silence hung heavy as the lights dimmed, leaving the audience frozen in place, still trying to process what had just happened. Outside, X erupted with clips of Hardy's confrontation, spreading like wildfire. One post declared Tom Hardy had ended Kimmel's career, gathering millions of views. Another celebrated that someone had finally spoken out against late-night bullying. While critics on the left labeled Hardy as unhinged, his fans praised him as a hero. The hashtag Hardy vs. Kimmel trended worldwide, becoming a digital symbol of the clash. Backstage, Hardy stood alone, calm and steady. A producer cautiously approached to apologize, but Hardy dismissed it. "I said what needed to be said," he told her quietly but firmly. Meanwhile, across town, Kimmel's team was in full damage control mode. Network executives held emergency meetings, trying to figure out how to manage the fallout. The following day, headlines blared, "Hardy's explosive exit shocks Kimmel audience." Variety called it a landmark moment for late-night TV culture. The Hollywood Reporter pointed out that Hardy had revealed a toxic interview culture. Fans on X shared montages of Kimmel's past ambushes, fueling the controversy. A young actress tweeted, "Thank you, Tom, for saying what we couldn't." Her post went viral, amplifying voices from Hollywood's overlooked corners. Leaked backstage footage showed Kimmel slumping after the cameras cut, while his team whispered anxiously, "This could ruin us." In a quiet London apartment, Hardy's wife watched the clips with pride and texted him, "You did the right thing." Amid the chaos, the impact spread beyond the studio, sparking a reckoning. Talk show hosts across networks began re-examining their formats, wary of backlash. A petition demanding Kimmel apologize for past interviews quickly gathered 500,000 signatures, reflecting widespread anger. Once known for lighthearted fun, late-night TV was now under scrutiny. Had it become a platform for cruelty, as Hardy claimed? In a small New York bar, aspiring actors raised glasses to Hardy's bravery. "He spoke for all of us," one said. Online forums buzzed with stories from Kimmel's former guests, their pain resurfacing. A comedian shared, "He mocked my divorce on air. I just smiled through it." The Hep Truth First movement, which started elsewhere, found renewed momentum here. Fans called for accountability, sharing clips under the hashtag #NoMoreKimmel. Kimmel's ratings fell, advertisers hesitated, sensing a shift. A week later, he issued a lawyer-crafted statement, vague but apologetic. "I regret any discomfort caused," he wrote, but it didn't calm the storm. Hardy remained silent on set, letting his work speak for him. His film soared at the box office, fans drawn to his honest performance. Hollywood buzzed, others might follow his example. The industry watched closely, wondering if this was a turning point. Late-night TV wasn't just entertainment anymore, it reflected power, who wields it and how. Hardy's stand wasn't about ego but dignity and boundaries. This clash exposed a culture that thrived on pain, unchecked until now. The audience became more than viewers, they were witnesses to a revealed truth. What are your thoughts on this historic confrontation? Have you ever seen a star dismantle a host like this live? Share your views in the comments. Let's keep this discussion going. Join us in demanding accountability from those who shape our stories. Subscribe for more raw Hollywood truths.